Let's check back in with Biden in 1897. Yeah, you heard me right. We're time traveling again for Executive Order Watch. Let's see what old Joe's got to say from way back when. Before Wi-Fi, before Twitter, before the donut even had a hole. This is Executive Order Watch, and I'm your host, E. Millions Williams. For democracy I live for democracy I die for. Saya soon.
My fellow Americans, today, we look back not just to remember, but to reflect on the legacy of a man whose leadership helped shape the path we walk now, President William McKinley, the 25th President of the United States, a soldier, a statesman, a unifier. At the turn of a new century, McKinley stood at the helm of a nation on the rise. He led us through war, protected American industry, and began the expansion of our global presence. But more than that, he governed with clarity and quiet strength, a belief that America's best days were always ahead. He believed in service above self. From the battlefield of the Civil War to the halls of the White House, McKinley stood as an example of duty, dignity, and determination. When he signed executive order after executive order, not for spectacle, but for structure, he was laying the groundwork for justice, order, and federal unity. Whether it was restoring law in Hawaii, respecting indigenous affairs, or ensuring that every citizen was counted in the census, McKinley governed not just for his time, but for ours. He understood that leadership is not noise, it's action. It's showing up, doing the work, and leaving behind something better than you found it. And while his life was cut short by the hand of violence, his vision never was. He believed in one nation, united in spirit and purpose. And so, as your president today, I say this: William McKinley's legacy is not frozen in the past. It's etched into the soul of our democracy. It lives on in the way we govern, the way we serve, and the way we carry the torch forward. So let us remember him not just in marble and memory, but in our everyday pursuit of a more perfect union. Thank you, and may God bless this country we all love.
My name is William McKinley, Jr., and I was born on January 29, 1843, in Niles, Ohio. My father, William McKinley, Sr., managed iron foundries, and my mother, Nancy, was a devout, nurturing woman who instilled in us the values of discipline, thrift, and faith. I was the seventh of 8 children. We lived simply, worked hard, and found joy in the outdoors. I fished, rode horses, ice skated, and swam in the Ohio River Valley. I attended local schools and then Poland Academy, where I first discovered my love of public speaking and debate. I briefly enrolled at Allegheny College, but had to leave due to illness and financial hardship. I was just a school teacher when the Civil War began, but I couldn't stand by idly. I enlisted as a private in the 23rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry. My unit became known as the Poland Guards. At Antietam, under fire, I delivered rations and hot coffee to men on the front lines. For that, I was promoted to second lieutenant. I fought at battles across western Virginia, Lexington, Lynchburg, Winchester, and Cedar Creek. During the fight at Cedar Creek, my horse was shot and pinned me. I still managed to free myself and get back to lead my men. By war's end, I was brevetted a major. I carried that title proudly the rest of my life. After the war, I studied law at Albany in New York and passed the Ohio bar in 1867. I opened my practice in Canton and soon became active in politics. In 1871, I married Ida Saxton, the daughter of a banker. We had 2 daughters, but heartbreak came early. Both girls died young, and Ida's health declined. Still, we remained close, and I always supported her. In 1876, I was elected to Congress at the age of 34. I served 7 terms, making my mark on tariff and monetary policy. I eventually became chairman of the Ways and Means Committee and authored the McKinley Tariff of 1890. Though it cost me my seat, Ohio still stood by me.
In 1891, I became governor of Ohio. I served 2 terms, championing both business development and labor protections, arbitration over strikes, balance over extremism. That was my philosophy. By the mid-1890s, with the country in turmoil, I sought the presidency. Mark Hanna, a brilliant strategist and friend, helped me secure the Republican nomination. In 1896, I ran against William Jennings Bryan. He toured the nation. I stayed in Canton and delivered my message to those who visited me, a campaign of stability, prosperity, and sound money. The country chose me. I have lived a life of service as a soldier, lawyer, legislator, governor, and president. I come from humble roots, and I have never forgotten the strength of the American spirit. Through my executive orders, I shaped the federal government to meet the needs of a growing nation. Let me tell you about some of them. I authorized the appointment of an assistant attorney general and a law clerk in the post office department without examination. We needed efficiency and trusted hands, and I saw to it that bureaucracy didn't stand in the way. I amended the consular regulations, waiving the personal appearance of shippers at consulates. Trade had to move freely, and I cleared the path. I revised the tariff of consular fees and brought all customs houses into the classified civil service. Fairness, transparency, and order guided me. I changed the rules so veterans mustered into military or naval service could be eligible for civil service positions without unnecessary delay. I owed them that. I gave thanks to the nation for our victories in war and made sure our fallen in Santiago were properly honored. I ordered their graves marked permanently. I placed the island of Guam under the control of the Navy Department. I knew the importance of strategic reach. I voided a questionable contract between the Republic of Hawaii and the Pacific Cable Company, ensuring American interests weren't compromised. I allowed consular agents to receive compensation that reflected their service and made adjustments for government printing office jobs, recognizing that even the smallest roles served the nation. I annulled improper sales of public lands in Hawaii, halted vessel registrations from unauthorized authorities, and ensured new government structures took root in annexed territories.
In the Philippines, I ensured the Civil Service Commission would assist the newly formed Philippine Civil Service Board. I wanted the same integrity we built at home extended abroad. I approved franchises for banks and railroads in Hawaii, fostering infrastructure and progress under American administration. I directed that all paymasters, clerks, and Navy draftsmen be accepted from examination where necessary. We needed talent in place fast. I made sure interpreters for the Treasury Department, especially those fluent in Chinese, could serve without delay. Language barriers would not stall justice or commerce. I granted half holidays to Civil War and Spanish-American War veterans in government service to attend ceremonies honoring their comrades. Respect, always respect. And I ordered that even foreign war vessels pay for bills of health issued by our authorities. Every act, every regulation, reinforcing sovereignty and structure. I governed with clarity, with responsibility, and with a deep belief that executive authority must be used wisely, sparingly, but decisively when the moment calls for it. As my presidency continued, I issued further executive orders to refine and expand the nation's civil structure and strengthen our institutions. I amended civil service rules to reclassify positions, ensuring only the most necessary roles were accepted from competitive exams. I knew the people's government had to be run by merit, not favoritism. When I approved multiple franchises in Hawaii for the Hilo Railroad, the Kohala and Hilo Railroad, and the Honolulu Rapid Transit and Land Company, I was thinking of connection, commerce, and American presence reaching across the Pacific. I opened the ports of the Philippines and other occupied territories to friendly commerce, making clear we welcome the world through our gates, not as conquerors, but as stabilizers of peace. I made arrangements for the Civil Service Commission to support local governance abroad, most notably in the Philippines. Establishing lawful, honest administration was a priority, no matter the distance. I adjusted age limits for lighthouse keepers and postal employees, recognizing that experience in service sometimes outweighed youthful strengths. These weren't just jobs, they were lifelines for entire communities. I ensured war veterans received promotion preference within civil roles, knowing that their sacrifice entitled them to continued service to their country in new ways. I approved a submarine cable from Germany to New York, paving the way for better international communication and strengthening our position in global affairs. Every order had a reason. Some protected veterans, some advanced infrastructure, others corrected improper governance in newly acquired territories. All of them were part of my vision, a government that adapts, serves, and grows stronger by earning the people's trust. My pen moved with purpose, never with pride, and though many of those orders may seem small on paper, I knew their ripples would guide the future. That was the weight of the office I carried, quietly, firmly, unshaken until my final day. I issued an executive order to excuse government employees related to soldiers of the 1st District of Columbia Regiment from duty on the day their regiment returned home. I believed families should be reunited without bureaucratic interference. I honored General John A. Rawlins by granting a half-holiday to Grand Army of the Republic members during the relocation of his remains to Arlington, and I ordered flags to half-mast. We do not forget those who served. When we interred the honored dead of the Spanish-American War at Arlington, I gave the order to do so with tribute. They had earned more than silence. I provided amnesty in the Philippines to those willing to lay down arms. I always believed in reconciliation where possible. When peace came, I ordered the government departments closed in mourning for Senator Murrill. His service to the nation had been long and distinguished. I directed that the general election planned by the Republic of Hawaii be canceled. We were moving toward territorial governance, and clarity was needed. I approved the issuance of consular court fees and fines, formalizing our international judicial reach. I issued an order allowing the collection of fees for bills of health issued to foreign war vessels. Even foreign navies, when in our waters, were to respect our standards. And I took steps to facilitate U.S. control of communications and transportation infrastructure in our new territories, preparing the Philippines, Guam, and Hawaii for stable transition. Each of these decisions was part of something larger, part of shaping a coherent and just administration in an expanding republic. I may have governed quietly, but my orders spoke loudly for order, respect, and readiness. Every executive order I issued came from conviction, not convenience. And now, allow me to speak plainly about what those decisions meant, what they were for. I ordered that public lands in Hawaii, unlawfully claimed or misappropriated before annexation, be returned to the government. That wasn't about land, it was about justice. I believed the law had to stand taller than personal gain, even in distant territories. I voided any vessel registration issued under the former Republic of Hawaii's authority, directing all maritime affairs to follow U.S. protocols. Our flags weren't just colors, they symbolized order, unity, and rightful governance. I restructured departments in Hawaii to align with our federal practices. That wasn't about power, it was about coherence. One union, one system. I couldn't allow duplicity. I approved adjustments for special agents of the Census Bureau. We needed every citizen counted fairly and thoroughly. Representation and funding depended on it, and I owed that to every state, territory, and settlement. I revised policies on the classification of Indian agencies and extended civil service protections where possible. Indigenous affairs required thoughtful administration, not neglect. Reform here wasn't optional, it was overdue. I granted exemptions for government workers during national ceremonies. It wasn't a favor, it was respect. Our government functions on discipline, but it breathes through honor and tradition. And I instructed that paymaster clerks in the Navy be accepted from examination when urgent service required it. In matters of national readiness, form could not come before function. We needed ships supplied, crews paid, and operations smooth. Each executive order, whether touching a desk job in Washington or a harbor in Manila, was a declaration that the Republic serves its people best when it's fair, firm, and forward-thinking. Some orders upheld justice, some ensured efficiency, many preserved dignity. They were my signature on the soul of the country. Quiet actions, perhaps, but I knew their echoes would outlast me. Every executive order I issued came from conviction, not convenience. And now, allow me to speak plainly about what those decisions meant, what they were for. I ordered that public lands in Hawaii, unlawfully claimed or misappropriated before annexation, be returned to the government. That wasn't about land, it was about justice. I believed the law had to stand taller than personal gain, even in distant territories. I voided any vessel registration issued under the former Republic of Hawaii's authority, directing all maritime affairs to follow U.S. protocols. Our flags weren't just colors. They symbolized order, unity, and rightful governance. I restructured departments in Hawaii to align with our federal practices. That wasn't about power. It was about coherence. One union, one system. I couldn't allow duplicity. I approved adjustments for special agents of the Census Bureau. We needed every citizen counted fairly and thoroughly. Representation and funding depended on it, and I owed that to every state, territory, and settlement. I revised policies on the classification of Indian agencies and extended civil service protections where possible. Indigenous affairs required thoughtful administration, not neglect. Reform here wasn't optional. It was overdue. I granted exemptions for government workers during national ceremonies. It wasn't a favor, it was respect. Our government functions on discipline, but it breathes through honor and tradition. And I instructed that paymaster clerks in the Navy be accepted from examination when urgent service required it. In matters of national readiness, form could not come before function. We needed ships supplied, crews paid, and operations smooth. Each executive order, whether touching a desk job in Washington or a harbor in Manila, was a declaration that the Republic serves its people best when it's fair, firm, and forward-thinking. Some orders upheld justice. Some ensured efficiency. Many preserved dignity. They were my signature on the soul of the country. Quiet actions, perhaps, but I knew their echoes would outlast me. And yet, even as I sought to serve peace, it was violence that found me. It was September 6, 1901. I stood before a crowd at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, unarmed, open, shaking hands. A man stepped forward with a bandaged hand. I reached out. He drew a pistol. 2 bullets struck. At first I thought I might recover. I prayed, not for myself, but for my wife. Be careful how you tell her, I whispered. Gangrene set in. 8 days later, I passed. Why was I killed? Because I believed in order, in peace, in law, and he believed in none of it. He was an anarchist. He saw my hand not as friendship, but as tyranny. He wanted to destroy government itself, but I do not believe he succeeded. My death was not the end of what I stood for. The Republic carried on, and I hope in some small way my orders, my service, and my sacrifice helped it stand taller.
My fellow Americans, today, we gather not just to reflect on history, but to reckon with it, to honor one life and introduce another that helped shape the very bedrock of our American identity. Before we speak of the 26th President Theodore Roosevelt, we must give thanks to the man who led us through the threshold of a new century, William McKinley. President McKinley was a man of calm resolve, a veteran who bore arms for the Union and then bore the weight of a growing republic on his shoulders. He steered our nation with discipline, with dignity, and with a deep belief that the United States had a role to play, not just at home, but in the world. He expanded American industry, protected our workers, and showed that progress didn't mean abandoning principle. His executive orders may not be household names, but they built order where there was uncertainty, justice where there was ambiguity, and fairness where there had once been privilege. And let me say this plainly, if not for the tragic day in Buffalo, if not for the assassin's bullet that cut short his presidency, there's a very real chance William McKinley's likeness would be carved into Mount Rushmore today. But fate handed that opportunity to the man who followed him. That man, the youngest president ever to take the oath, was Theodore Roosevelt, and history remembers him as bold, brash, and unrelenting, a man of action, a reformer, a conservationist, a warrior in both word and deed. But it was McKinley who first offered Roosevelt the role of vice president. It was McKinley who laid the groundwork, and it was McKinley's passing that propelled Roosevelt to lead with vigor and vision. So as we now turn our attention to our 26th president, let us not forget the man whose steady hands passed the baton and whose quiet strength gave way to a thunderous new age. To William McKinley, thank you. And now, let us remember Theodore Roosevelt, not as a man who took the stage uninvited, but as one who rose when history demanded it. Thank you all. May God bless our past, guide our future, and bless the United States of America.
Greetings, fellow citizens. I am Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of these United States, and I welcome you to a recounting, not just of events, but of convictions, battles, and the spirit of a square deal for all. I was thrust into the presidency on September 14th, 1901, upon the tragic death of President McKinley, shot by an assassin while I was off climbing the Adirondacks. At 42, I became the youngest man to ever assume the office. I didn't wait for history to catch up, I made it. Just 1 month into the presidency, I invited Mr. Booker T. Washington to dine at the White House, an act that ruffled feathers in the South, but I say a man's merit is his own, regardless of color or creed. I called on Congress in my first message to regulate the trusts, conserve our vast natural resources, and build a navy that could speak softly but carry a big stick. You might say I set the tone early. We signed the Hay-Pauncefote Treaty with Britain, giving us the sole right to build that mighty canal across the isthmus. And by 1903, we backed Panama's independence from Colombia and secured the land to construct the Panama Canal. I traveled there in 1906, first sitting president to step foot outside the country while in office. In the domestic trenches, I wasn't afraid to challenge the titans of industry. When the Pennsylvania coal miners went on strike, I intervened, not for capital or labor, but for the people freezing in their homes. That was the first time a president had dared to insert himself into a labor dispute for the public good. In 1903, I created the Department of Commerce and Labor, launched the Bureau of Corporations, and signed the Elkins Act to combat railroad kickbacks. We were fighting back against monopolies, and I didn't just speak of conservation, I acted. Over 100 million acres of national forests, 5 national parks, 18 national monuments, including the Grand Canyon, and 51 bird reserves were set aside during my tenure. Pelican Island in Florida, that was the first federal bird refuge, and I declared it myself. The Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine? Yes, I meant what I said. We would not permit European meddling in the Americas, and we would stand firm if nations in our hemisphere failed to meet their obligations. In 1904, I won election in my own right by a landslide, and with it came responsibility. We passed the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act after Mr. Upton Sinclair exposed the horrors in Chicago's slaughterhouses. The jungle opened our eyes, and I turned outrage into action. I also signed the Hepburn Act, giving real teeth to the Interstate Commerce Commission, no more unchecked power for the railroad barons. They had to play fair and play by the people's rules, yet not all moments were proud. In 1906, the Brownsville affair led me to dishonorably discharge 167 black soldiers. History would later see the error, and I'm thankful it was reversed, though I wish I'd seen it more clearly then. I believed in peace through strength. When Japan and Russia went to war, I mediated peace at Portsmouth, earning the Nobel Peace Prize, first American to do so. And I spoke often of reform, not revolution, but of true reform. The man with the muckrake, I said, must know when to look up from the filth toward the stars. Ha ha ha, and I ran again in 1912, not as a Republican, but as a bull moose. When they tried to silence me, I told the people, we stand at Armageddon, and we battle for the Lord. Even after being shot in the chest in Milwaukee, I still delivered my speech, because the cause was greater than one man. They didn't make men like me to stand idle. Whether wrangling cattle in the Badlands, leading the Rough Riders up San Juan Hill, or championing conservation, I charged forward. The year 1907 dawned with determination. I signed an act forbidding corporate contributions to political campaigns. Money had too long corrupted the spirit of our democracy. That same year, I addressed the rising tension between the city of San Francisco and Japanese immigrants. When the school board sought to segregate Japanese children, I made it clear this was a wicked absurdity. Our friends in Japan had shown generosity after the San Francisco earthquake. We owed them respect and decency. Thus came the gentleman's agreement, an understanding without humiliation. Speaking of the quake, April 18th, 1906, San Francisco was battered by earth and flame. I dispatched the army and offered federal aid without hesitation. It was a time to rebuild, not to bicker. I continued signing forest reserves, battling corruption, and speaking for those without voice. In 1906, I signed the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act, giving Americans safe food and honest labeling. No more snake oil, no more poison in the pantry. Then came the Hepburn Act, forcing railroads to play fair and establishing the government's role in setting reasonable rates for shipping. Not the robber barons, but the Republic would have the final word. Later that year, I journeyed to Panama, becoming the first president to travel abroad while in office. I wanted to see the canal, not on a map, but in the mud. I wanted to look those workers in the eye and say, we are building this together. And then came 1907. The panic of 1907 shook Wall Street to its knees. Rumors of collapse spread like wildfire. I stepped in, not with softness, but with resolve. I worked with financiers to stabilize credit, restore confidence, and prevent a deeper catastrophe. Government was not the enemy of the people. It was their shield. In December of that same year, I sent out the Great White Fleet, 16 gleaming battleships on a round-the-world voyage. We painted them white to signify peace, but their presence spoke of strength. Let the world know America does not threaten, but neither does she cower. By 1908, my time in office neared its end. I declared the Grand Canyon a national monument, ensuring its grandeur would be preserved as it is now for all time. I called a governor's conference on conservation, and we created the National Conservation Commission to protect our land, our water, and our future. I signed a child labor law for the District of Columbia, protecting children under 14 from factory work. For what is a nation worth if it devours its own youth? In 1909, I handed the reins of the presidency to my chosen successor, William Howard Taft. I signed an Appropriations Act raising the president's salary from $50,000 to $75,000, though I assure you I never entered public service for gold. But I was not done. I left the presidency in March of 1909, but I did not retire. I reloaded. Ha ha ha. They expected me to fade into the background. Instead, I went on safari. In the wilds of Africa, I hunted, I studied, I cataloged more than 11,000 specimens collected for the Smithsonian Institution and American museums, but my fight was never with the beasts of the jungle. It was with the beasts of power and corruption. When I returned to America, the world was changing, and not always for the better. President Taft, my hand-picked successor, had turned his back on the spirit of reform. I felt duty-bound to step back into the arena. In 1910, at the Sorbonne in Paris, I gave a speech that would echo through the ages: citizenship in a republic. You may know it best as the man in the arena. It is not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. That is how I lived, and how I wished my nation to live. Later that year, I traveled to Osawatomie, Kansas, and declared my vision of the new nationalism, a bold proposal to confront special interests, protect labor, and ensure that the common good outweighed private greed. I demanded equal opportunity for all Americans, not just equal rights in name. Then came 1912. I declared, I will accept the nomination if it is tendered to me, and when the Republican Party chose Taft through what I believed to be dishonest dealings, I and my supporters formed a new force, the Progressive Party. The press called us the Bull Moose Party because I told them I felt fit as a bull moose. And by thunder I was. Our cause was just. Our momentum was real. And on October 14th, 1912 in Milwaukee, a would-be assassin shot me in the chest. The bullet pierced my manuscript and my steel eyeglass case, then entered my body, but it did not reach my heart. I stood up, bloodied, and said, "It takes more than that to kill a bull moose." Then I gave my speech, 90 minutes long, with a bullet still in me. But though we won 4 million votes and 88 electoral votes, the split among reformers gave victory to the Democrat, Woodrow Wilson. Still, I fought on. I wrote, I lectured, I explored the river of doubt in Brazil, nearly dying of infection. My body weakened, but never my spirit. I was a rancher and a rough rider, a reformer and a conservationist, a trust buster and a peacemaker. I faced assassins and titans, riots and revolutions. I believed that America must be bold, just and brave. Do what you can with what you have, where you are. That was my creed. And so I say to you in the twilight of my tale, enter the arena, strive valiantly, dare greatly. The republic is yours to carry forward. Bully.
My fellow Americans, we've just heard from two men who helped shape the trajectory of this nation, President William McKinley and President Theodore Roosevelt, two leaders who stood at the dawn of a new century, who helped define America's global presence, who expanded its reach, and who, whether they realized it or not, etched their beliefs into the foundation we still walk on today. McKinley, with quiet calculation, and Roosevelt, with thunder and will. They brought progress, yes, but they also carried the burdens and the blind spots of their time. We see echoes of them now in our immigration debates, in our conversations on race, power, and equality, in the decisions we face as a nation still striving to live up to its promise. If we don't look back, if we don't study where we've been, we risk spinning in circles. We risk mistaking old mistakes for new problems. That's the thing about history. It's not just behind us, it's beneath us. And if we forget it, we fall through the cracks it leaves behind. It's on all of us to know what took place yesterday, so we can better understand what's happening today and be brave enough to shape a tomorrow we can be proud of. With that said, thank you for listening. Now, I'm handing it back over to a voice that makes history hit different, E. Millions Williams.
Let's talk about a man who rode up San Juan Hill, dined with Booker T. Washington, built the Panama Canal, crushed corporate monopolies, and still thought white men were the pinnacle of civilization. Theodore Roosevelt. Now don't get it twisted. Roosevelt wasn't burning crosses or wearing hoods. He wasn't 100% KKK, not even close. But he wasn't a 0% either. If we're being real, on a scale from full-blown white supremacist to I married a black woman, Roosevelt lands around 65 to 70% racially biased. And that number might sting because we're taught to admire him. And yes, there's a lot to admire. He broke up corporate monopolies, fought for food safety, helped birth the national parks, and invited a black man to dinner at the White House for the first time in history. That was 1901, and the country exploded in backlash. Southern newspapers called it an insult to the South. But Roosevelt stood firm. He said a man's merit, not his skin, was what mattered. That's progress. But here's the hard truth. Roosevelt believed in the superiority of the white race. He called Native Americans savages, supported the Chinese Exclusion Act, and said wars against indigenous people were righteous. That's not coded racism, that's open-air colonialism. He thought white expansion across the continent was not just destiny, but divine. And yet, he knew better. He respected Japan. He warned against treating Japanese immigrants unfairly. He called segregation of their children a wicked absurdity. And he called lynching what it was, a breakdown of civilization. Roosevelt was caught in a contradiction. A man smart enough to recognize injustice, but too committed to empire, race hierarchy, and civilization to walk all the way toward justice. That's the story we have to tell. Not a hero, not a villain, but a human being with power, who pushed the country forward while still standing on the necks of others. So, yes, Theodore Roosevelt helped move America forward. But he also reinforced the lie that some people were more American than others. That duality, that tension, that's America. And it's on us to keep pushing further than even Roosevelt dared. When we talk about President William McKinley, we're looking at a man who didn't shout racism, but quietly enforced it. He believed in America's destiny to expand, but that expansion came at the cost of non-white lives and voices. To black Americans, he offered token gestures, maybe a post office job here and there, but he said nothing while lynching spread like wildfire across the South. He let Jim Crow take root, no resistance. Native Americans? He backed policies that stole their land, stripped their culture, and forced their children into boarding schools to kill the Indian, save the man. When it came to the Philippines, Guam or Puerto Rico, McKinley saw their people as too uncivilized to govern themselves, so America stepped in to rule them, not to help, but to dominate. His racial worldview was soaked in paternalism and silence, and that silence upheld white supremacy more than any speech ever could. For democracy we live for democracy we die for. Until next time.